America is bracing for a political showdown unlike anything we've seen in years. President Trump has just announced that he plans to release a list of Democrat-backed programs that will be permanently shut down, not paused, not trimmed, but closed for good. And the timing couldn't be more critical. The federal government is already in its 14th day of shutdown, with no end in sight. But here's the shocker. Trump says this list will not only outline which programs he intends to cut, but will define how he wants the next term of his presidency to look. Education, climate, foreign aid, and even public broadcasting, all of them could soon be on the chopping block. The question every American is asking right now is, what does this mean for us? For 2 weeks, Washington has been paralyzed. Congress is split, Democrats and Republicans locked in a standoff, and millions of Americans already feeling the fallout. Speaker Mike Johnson has warned that this could become the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, possibly surpassing the 34-day record of 2018 to 2019. That would mean another 20 days or more of unpaid federal workers, delayed benefits, frozen projects, and mounting uncertainty. Meanwhile, Democrats are demanding that Trump personally step in to negotiate. They say the shutdown could end within 48 hours if he simply takes the lead. But Trump isn't budging. And according to insiders, he's using the shutdown to build momentum for something bigger. A leaner, nationalist government, one that cuts deeply into programs linked to Democratic priorities. Trump's announcement was brief but deliberate. On Friday, he will unveil a list of Democrat-backed programs that will be permanently shut down. He made clear this isn't about temporary cost-cutting or delaying payments. It's about reshaping how the federal government spends money permanently. And if you're wondering whether this is just political theater, experts are divided. Some say this could be a bluff designed to pressure Democrats into reopening the government. Others believe it's a blueprint for his second term, showing exactly what kind of America he wants to build. One where the government pulls back from progressive and social initiatives. One of the most strategic moves Trump made during this shutdown came earlier this week. He directed Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to divert $8 billion from Pentagon research and testing funds to keep military paychecks flowing during the shutdown. This single decision flipped the political script. Until now, Democrats believed Trump couldn't afford a prolonged shutdown because it would leave active duty service members unpaid. But by finding that workaround, he eliminated that vulnerability. Democrats can't realistically go to court to stop the military from getting paid. That would be political suicide. And that means Trump just gained massive leverage. He looks like the one protecting the troops, while Democrats appear to be protecting bureaucracy. It's a smart play, and it changes how the next few weeks could unfold. So, what could be on that list Trump says he'll release Friday? According to multiple reports and people familiar with internal discussions, several categories of programs are under review. And if these cuts become permanent, the impact will ripple through nearly every American community. Let's start with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Trump has been critical of DEI since his first term, when he ended federal diversity training through executive order. Now, insiders say those cuts could be made permanent, wiping out DEI offices across federal agencies and education departments. These programs currently represent hundreds of millions in federal grants, scholarships, and hiring initiatives focused on inclusion. Ending them would shift how universities, government contractors, and even local schools approach equity and recruitment. Next, public broadcasting. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which supports PBS and NPR, receives roughly $525 million a year in federal funding. Those dollars sustain local stations, educational programming, and journalism in small towns and rural communities. If that funding disappears, hundreds of stations could close within months. Educational children's shows, community radio, and cultural programming would vanish. Not because of poor ratings, but because the check from Washington stopped coming. And here's the part that worries media experts. This would mark the first time in U.S. history that public broadcasting loses all federal support permanently. It's not a pause, it's a potential erasure. Now, let's talk about climate and clean energy programs. According to sources close to state project managers, several states, especially blue ones like New York and California, are already seeing funding delays for renewable energy initiatives. Many of these projects are massive: bridge repairs, solar farms, and clean energy construction that employ thousands of workers. If federal funding stops midway, these projects stall immediately. Thousands of construction workers, engineers, and laborers could lose their jobs overnight. States that relied on federal matching funds would face budget holes they can't fill alone. For example, the Department of Energy has over $30 billion in active climate grants. Even a partial freeze could affect more than 50,000 contracted workers across the country. And remember, many of these projects aren't just green energy. They're infrastructure: roads, bridges, tunnels, the very projects that keep local economies alive. Education programs are also on Trump's radar. Federal access programs like TRIO, which includes Upward Bound, Talent Search, and Student Support Services, help roughly 800,000 low-income and first-generation college students every year. The total cost to taxpayers, about $1.2 billion annually. If TRIO is defunded, thousands of young Americans could lose tutoring, mentoring, and college prep opportunities that often break cycles of poverty. And that's not all. Reports say that just in the last 24 hours, more than 4,000 special education staff positions have already been cut or furloughed because of the shutdown itself, before any permanent list is even released. This means schools, especially in low-income districts, are already feeling the pain before the political battle is even settled. Foreign aid and cultural grants are also on the table. Programs under the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities, as well as certain forms of international assistance, could face elimination. Combined, these programs cost several $billions a year, but they fund thousands of local museums, arts centers, and humanitarian partnerships around the world. These cuts would send a symbolic message, one that aligns with Trump's America First philosophy. The administration could argue that money spent abroad or on cultural projects would now stay home to reduce deficits. But critics say these are the very programs that promote diplomacy, education, and community identity, things that don't always show up on a balance sheet, but deeply affect American culture. One area drawing close attention is the WIC program, or Women, Infants, and Children. This program supports about 8 million women and children nationwide by providing nutrition assistance, baby formula, and food benefits. Sources indicate WIC will not be eliminated, but eligibility rules may change. Trump is reportedly reallocating $300 million from tariff revenue to fund WIC, meaning fewer middle-income or borderline families may qualify. That could be a major shift, especially for working mothers whose income slightly exceeds the cutoff. While this move keeps WIC alive, it narrows who benefits, focusing only on families in absolute need. Beyond federal departments, hundreds of community grants could soon be frozen. These include funding for local nonprofits, senior services, youth mentorship, and even housing support programs tied to the Department of Labor or Health and Human Services. When these grants stop, the impact is immediate. Local organizations often operate month to month, relying on federal reimbursements. A funding freeze means layoffs, canceled services, and increased pressure on charities to fill the gaps. For millions of Americans, seniors, veterans, low-income families, that means fewer community safety nets right when the economy is already uncertain. So what's the bigger strategy? This list isn't just about closing programs, it's about testing public reaction. Trump is gauging how Americans respond to large-scale cuts before he formally launches the next phase of his policy agenda. He's framing it as a return to lean government, less bureaucracy, more efficiency, and fewer progressive experiments. Democrats, however, see it as a targeted strike on programs that invest in equality, education, and climate resilience. If Trump's approval numbers rise after the Friday announcement, it signals that a significant portion of Americans support downsizing government, even if it means losing familiar programs. If the backlash is severe, he'll know which policies to soften heading into election season. Right now, Washington is locked in what insiders call a political game of chicken. Neither side wants to blink first. Democrats fear that if they compromise, Trump will claim victory and keep the cuts anyway. Republicans argue they're finally standing up against runaway spending, but while they battle, the clock keeps ticking. The economic cost of this shutdown exceeds $1 billion per week, according to Moody's Analytics. That includes lost wages, delayed contracts, and reduced consumer spending. Every extra day deepens the pain for workers and small businesses across the country. And as the stalemate drags on, the biggest losers might not be politicians. It's everyday Americans, families waiting on paychecks, students missing funding, and communities whose projects are frozen mid-build. So, how does this all come back to you? If you're a teacher, a construction worker, a small business owner, or even someone who relies on community health programs, these cuts could touch your life directly. A bridge project in your town could stop halfway. A scholarship your child relies on could vanish. A local public radio station could go silent. These aren't distant, abstract government programs. They're part of the fabric of daily life. The after effects could stretch far beyond Washington, hitting local jobs, schools, and families long after the government finally reopens. Here's the truth. This isn't just about money, it's about momentum. Trump has found a way to use the shutdown itself as leverage to define what government reform looks like in real time. If the public accepts these permanent closures, he'll have proof that large sections of America want leaner spending. If there's outrage, he can still claim victory for trying to cut waste. Either way, it's a calculated move, and one that could reshape how future shutdowns are used as political weapons. Friday will be a critical day. Once that list is released, we'll know exactly which programs are targeted, which are safe, and which are simply too controversial to touch. That list could serve as the roadmap for Trump's second term, a government that's smaller, more nationalistic, and far less involved in social and climate policy. For millions of Americans, it means change, uncertain, unpredictable, and potentially permanent. As the story develops, I'll keep breaking down every confirmed update, especially how it affects education, social security programs, community aid, and working families. If you want to stay ahead of these changes and understand what they mean for your community, subscribe to Social Security Post and share this video so others can stay informed. Because if these shutdown cuts become permanent, they won't just change the budget. They'll change the very way America invests in its people. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next update.